Welcome back to Big Riff Energy. It's Tuesday, April 2nd. This is episode 56. This show is called Big Riff Energy. You want to talk about some Big Riff Energy? Coffin Storm, Arcana Rising. I think that's how it's pronounced. That's how Fenriz pronounces it when he sings it. Arcana. This came out on Friday. This last Friday. I've been listening to it all weekend. Listened to it 3 times. Streaming, which I wanted to wait for the vinyl, but I just couldn't wait. The vinyl showed up Friday night, but listened to it 3 times in a row. You know, I had tempered my expectations based off of the single, and we're going to dive deep into this because obviously, if you love big riffs, the music on this thing is all-time big riff energy. Not only the biggest riff energy I've heard this year, which, by the way, Norway seems to be winning the BRE arms race this year because we have Sovereign Altered Realities. Is that what it's called? And now Coffin Storm, Arcana Rising. So the rest of the world needs to do some catching up. I know the States got a new High on Fire album coming, a new Wake album coming. So we'll see how it all comes out in the wash. But right now, Norway's kicking everybody's ass, and I'm going to dive into this album. Like I said, if you like big riffs, the music is indisputable. It's all-time phenomenal big riff energy. The vocals are probably going to divide people pretty fiercely. I think you're either going to really love them or really hate them. But I'm going to get into why I think the vocals are perfect for this album. And so does Apollyon, who wrote a lot of this stuff, I'm assuming, and played drums, tracked all the music himself, played guitar and bass. Here's a band photo from the insert. And, you know, Apollyon, the second thing, like he thanks his bandmates first in the liner notes. Bestial Tormentor is the other guy who's playing guitar. Apparently these two dudes were in a band way back in the day called Lamented Souls. I'll get into all of that. But the second person that Apollyon thanks is Fenriz for perfect vocals. And he also mentions, and for lending me the legendary hi-hat for a couple songs. So I don't know if that's the Dark Throne hi-hat or what. But, man, this is an old school metal record. This is the kind of metal record that you're sitting there excited to show up or excited to get from your record store. Phenomenal cover art, really fun album cover. It really sort of encapsulates the vibe and the sound of the record, and fun liner notes. You know, it's got the lyrics. It tells you exactly when Fenriz wrote the lyrics. He recorded vocals in his quote unquote open kitchen. So we'll talk about that. Yeah, it's just a fun record, man. God, where to even start? So in the press release, they sort of explain the origins of this band. So it's mainly 2 guys that came up with the idea for this band. Apollyon, you know him from Ara Noir. He was also an Immortal for a minute. And then this guy, Bestial Tormentor, from an old thrash band called Inferno. These guys are all from, I'll probably mispronounce this, Kolbotn, Norway. And Fenriz explains that the 2 guys were, well, I guess all of them had access to all the metal in the massive amounts of record stores in Oslo. And the other 2 guys grew up playing doom metal together in Lamented Souls. This is while Fenriz was forming Dark Throne. And then in 2020, these guys sort of got back together. You know, Lamented Souls didn't really go anywhere because Apollyon did Ara Noir, among other things. But these guys got back together and came up with the idea for this new band, Coffin Storm. And they eventually asked Fenriz if he would do vocals. And Apollyon sort of explains it a little further, that they were almost scared to ask Fenriz to sing. Originally, Apollyon was going to do the vocals himself. But Bestial Tormentor popped the question of Fenriz, and he agreed to do it. They recorded the drums in the rehearsal place. That's what they say, with 4 microphones. And then Apollyon added bass and guitar at his house. And then they went to Fenriz's kitchen to do vocals. And he says, initially I was assuming the music would be doom metal. I think all of us had Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus by Candlemass in mind. But even if our songs are slow / mid-tempo, the riffs ended up being more thrashy than I had expected. I think that's a pretty good description. I read a chunk of a review for the last Spirit Adrift record that was one of the highest compliments I think you can receive as a modern metal band. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but it was something like this sort of channels the vibe of the old days when metal wasn't so fiercely divided into subgenres and stuff like that. And I would say the same thing about Coffin Storm. To me, the most pivotal and exciting period in metal was when the first wave of metal, bands like Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Merciful Fate, stuff like that, were sort of that type of music was morphing into more extreme and varying branches. Like I've talked about it in the last episode, I think, kind of like veins branching off from the heart, right? So to me, the most exciting period in metal is when metal is branching off into sort of more extreme black metal leanings, hints of black metal. So like Celtic Frost, Merciful Fate. And then over here, you've got the new wave of British heavy metal, which is just sort of a more aggressive version of traditional metal. It's starting to infuse some punk, some original first wave punk attitude into traditional metal. And then you have, you know, what's going on in the Bay Area with the thrash stuff, taking that new wave of British heavy metal and that punk influence and making it even more extreme, mining a little bit from those first wave genesis of black metal bands, you know, Venom and Merciful Fate. And then you have the original doom metal band starting, Saint Vitus and Trouble and stuff like that. The first wave of extreme metal, you know, Slayer, early Slayer, all that stuff just kind of in a big melting pot. And there was one sort of unified culture behind it. And there was almost a shared aesthetic between all the different subgenres. It was a vibe, as they say nowadays. It was a vibe. Just a melting pot of exciting ideas and fun, but also pushing things to out extreme each other, you know, in like a horror movie kind of way, or out extreme each other in a heaviness kind of way, right? That's the most fun and exciting and interesting period of music and of big riff energy to me. And this Coffin Storm album is that. It's there's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack, but it has the youthful exuberance and excitement of teenagers making music, but it has the skill and the experience and the expertise of dudes that have been making music with big riff energy for decades. That's kind of at the crux of this album. It's just really exciting. It's fun, but it's like expert level riffing and songwriting, and I will say vocals, as divisive as they might be. So the drums, you know, said they use 4 mics as proof that you don't need anything fancy to get a good drum sound. They sound like drums. And I'm going to assume it's maybe a kick drum mic, a snare mic, and 2 overheads, or maybe 1 overhead and a room mic. Who knows? But the kick sounds like a kick. The snare sounds like a snare. It sounds like a drum kit. Powerful. The kick sound, which I know is very important to Fenriz and probably to these other guys. Actually, in Fenriz's section of the thanks, he says, piss off to click tracks, clicky bass drums, and auto-tune. So the kick drum reminds me of a story that I saw or read about Richie Albright, who drummed for Waylon Jennings. They couldn't get his kick drum sound right. And I think this was in the live setting, maybe studio, I can't remember. But he was wasted in the hotel room complaining about the sound of his kick drum. They had a bucket of fried chicken, and he's belligerent and takes a big chunk of chicken, maybe a fried chicken wing, greasy, sloppy, delicious chicken wing. And he says, the fucking kick drum needs to sound like this. And he throws this greasy fried chicken against the wall of the motel room, and it makes a greasy, slimy thud, whatever the sound of greasy, shitty piece of fried chicken would make hitting the wall in a Motel 6 or whatever. And that is the ultimate aspiration for a kick drum sound, and that's what the Coffin Storm kick drum sound reminds me of. The bass tone, it sounds like a bass. It sounds like a very growly, dirty, Lemmy-ish, Cliff Burton-y, Ride the Lightning, Overkill kind of. It just sounds like a bass. It's not too modern, low-end sounding. It's not clunky. You're not getting a bunch of pick attack sound and too much treble. It's a lot of mid-range, growly, overdriven bass, but it sounds like a bass. It stands out from the kick. It stands out from the guitars. Guitar tone is very much 1984, I want to say. Fenriz says of the single, the advanced single Over Frozen Moors, right off the bat, it's a chunky 1984 style Exodus riff. And I think the guitar tone is probably also 1984. Trouble, first Trouble album. The guitars are heavy, but they're not taking up so much space that it's crushing the rest of the mix. They're not over compressed that they're drowning out the vocals or the cymbals or anything like that. They have this sort of honky Marshall tone, but chunky, man. According to legend, before tracking Ride the Lightning, James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett saw Trouble. Marshall JCM 800s, much like the one behind me. It's a 1984 unmodified Marshall JCM 800. James and Kirk from Metallica saw Trouble, liked their guitar tone so much that they took note of their settings and everything like that. So I'm hearing that. I'm hearing a tone that's somewhere between Ride the Lightning and the first couple Trouble albums. Spooky sounding. There's like a lot more reverb on it than you would hear in like a modern guitar mix, but it's just perfect. It's a perfect tone and a perfect sound for this album. It sounds like what the album cover looks like. Very spooky, very heavy, exciting. The type of guitar tone that gets you excited to learn how to play guitar when you're a teenager or an adolescent. The riffs, man, there's something special too that happens when the person playing drums has an inherent understanding of guitar riffs and where the accents of the guitar riffs are and where the spaces are and what needs to be accentuated, where the drums have little moments where they can do unexpected stuff. There's a lot of Lars Ulrich inspired off-time crash and kick accents that you don't expect. The drum performance in relation to the riffs is perfect. There's a few albums that come to mind that are the same way. One of them is the first Sumerlands album. Justin DeTore is a multi-instrumentalist as well, and his drumming on that album in relation to the riffs and where the accents and where the heartbeat and the pulse of the riffs are is perfect. And this album reminds me a lot of that. Another guy that's perfect at that, Lars Ulrich. Whether you like to admit it or not, it's true. But the riffs themselves, every riff in every song, I would give an A at least. And some of them, I would say, in addition to that, every song has an all-time great riff in it. I know this sounds like hyperbole and exaggerations, but listen to the last riff in the first song. Listen to the verse riff in Open the Gallows. I read an interview with Apollyon about what his favorite song on the album is, and he mentioned that song, Open the Gallows. It's 10 minutes long. It feels like it goes by in 4 or 5 minutes. And part of that is because you have this amazing verse riff with these different tags on it in different accents and unexpected endings. But then every time the verse riff comes back, there's a different tag, or there's different little guitar licks, subtle little changes that you might not be aware of the first time you hear it, but there's a reason why the song flies by in no time, despite being 10 minutes long. This is expert level stuff that I'm talking about. You know, the riffs themselves have the spirit of a testosterone, adrenaline fueled teenager who is just discovering this music and is overjoyed by big riff energy, but it has the expertise, the arrangement expertise, and the fucking ingenious songwriting that can only come through decades of writing songs like this. So I'm going to get to the most divisive part, the vocals. Now, when I was listening to this the first time, like I said, I heard the advanced single. I sort of tempered my expectations and I waited. I didn't listen to it again. I just wanted to listen to the whole album. And I was hearing, obviously, First Candlemas, early Manila Road, maybe Scott Rieger's St. Vitus. And then, much to my excitement, Fenriz's section in the liner notes is all about the vocals. And now, for my assumed inspirations for the singing, he mentions Rigid Domain, he mentions Agent Steel, First Candlemas album, Manila Road, Solitude Aeternus, early Queensryche, early Pentagram, Dio, and he gets as specific as mentioning like actual albums. So Live Evil, Mob Rules, and Last in Line. Those are probably my favorite Dio performances too. But what about Dehumanizer, Riz? Come on, man. Let's see. Fate's Warning, Omen, Halloween, Uriah Heep, Iron Maiden. And then he mentions, oddly enough, Jim Morrison from The Doors on Morrison Hotel because he listened to it a lot when he was 2 to 3 years old. And Morrison Hotel has one of the greatest lyrics ever recorded. Wonder if you can predict what I will quote from Morrison Hotel. Here it is. One of the greatest lyrics on the human condition ever written. It's so funny to me he specifically mentions this album. I woke up this morning, got myself a beer. I woke up this morning and got myself a beer. The future's uncertain and the end is always near. If that's not doom, I don't know what is, man. And if you're listening to that at 2 to 3 years old, of course that's going to rub off on you. Fenriz continues to say, after this list, it seems I worked very hard on being overly pretentious about my vocals for this album, but I was really just improvising and not fussing too much when I sang out of tune. I just hope it feels alive. All caps. Yeah, it does, man. And does he sound like any of those influences he mentioned? Not really. I can understand how those are the type of vocals he's going for. But there is once again, a youthful, careless, there's a song on here called Ceaseless Abandon. I think that describes the vocals. They do feel very alive. They are unpolished. They are unhinged. I'm kind of surprised he didn't mention Scott Rieger's from St. Vitus because it reminds me a lot of his approach, especially the Die Healing album. As I listened to this record, I tried to imagine any other vocal style. Any kind of harsh vocal would ruin it. Any kind of like black metal, death metal, hardcore punk, bark, anything like that would kill the soul of a very special piece of music and make it more monotonous than it deserves to be. We have enough of that. We have enough screechy, growly, guttural, barking, unintelligible bullshit. There's plenty of that. A quote unquote great vocal performance that's practiced and refined and operatic and perfectly in tune and all the right operatic singing techniques and traditional choral perfect stuff, like a Bruce Dickinson vocal wouldn't work for this record because it has that youthful, raw, unpolished punk kind of thing. And honestly, some of the riffs, I think most of the riffs are either like Phrygian. It's either Phrygian, like, or Slayer, kind of evil sounding early Slayer. Some of it's a little borderline atonal, like maybe early Voivod or something like that. But then a lot of it is also what's called chromatic. So you're moving one fret at a time in half steps. Think Celtic Frost, first two Celtic Frost albums, Hellhammer. Even like I Hate God does a lot of that chromatic stuff. Phantom of the Opera, right? That shit's kind of hard to sing over because it's moving in half step increments, and you can sing in half step increments, but it doesn't always sound very good, and it's kind of can be awkward and weird. So Fenrir is on a lot of this, he's between notes. He's like sliding between, he's sliding around. He's using his voice not to really hit a particular note, but more to create some kind of ghostly vibe, a wailing, he sounds like this hooded figure with the gnarled fingers on the cover, howling from the frozen moors. And what a lot of vocalists don't understand is the vibe is as important or more important than the note when it comes to certain styles of music. When he needs to hit a note, he hits the note. When he needs to create a vibe, he creates the vibe. He mentioned the word alive. That's what it sounds like. I can't recommend this record enough, man. This is one of the most exciting records I've heard in a long, long time. It's been forever since I listened to something, and as I'm listening to it, I'm imagining a guitar in my hand, playing the riffs and thinking about how to play the riffs and where the riffs are going. The songwriting is just ingenious. Expert level stuff. There's so many little tricks being implemented. All of my favorite tricks, modulating up a full step, modulating down a full step, adding little weird different tags to riffs when they come back around, adding little 1 second time signature switches, stopping on a dime to build a sense of drama and stuff like that. The lead guitar is really fascinating. God, it's just good, man. What can I say? This is for fans of what did they say in the press release? They said overlooking the glorious days of sensational heavy metal, epic doom, and slow thrash. Very important. Slow thrash. We associate thrash metal with fast stuff, but there's something super powerful about mid-tempo and slow thrash metal guitar riffs. Think about the most bruising, belligerent sections of Ride the Lightning. For fans of the first Trouble album, for fans of all the bands I mentioned, early Slayer, when traditional heavy metal is slowly mutating into the first signs of extreme metal, right? And everybody was just having a good time. Punks and thrashers and death metal people and black metal freaks, and everybody was just all in the same thing, crossover, all that kind of stuff. This will appeal to hardcore kids who pretend to like the first two Candlemass records. One thing I do love about the vocals is it's going to weed out people that aren't down. There's a few phrases that come to mind when describing the vocals, and it would be stuff like, if you are a false, do not entry, or wimps and posers leave the hall, that sort of thing. But all you hardcore kids that pretend to like Candlemass, check this out, because it's got mosh parts. The last riff in that first song is just outrageous. These riffs are every bit as good as anything on Ride the Lightning or Bonded by Blood or, early Trouble stuff. What a record, man. Okay, between this and that Sovereign record, like I said, Norway is kind of kicking the shit out of the rest of the globe with the big riff energy. Let's go to some emails and we're going to wrap this up. This episode is going to be pretty straightforward because I am working on a top 10 Doom album list. There won't be an episode next week. I'm putting that video on YouTube, hopefully on Tuesday, in lieu of a podcast episode. So I'm just going to blow through these. Max, just watched your Dark Throne episode and wanted to say, holy shit, I experienced the exact same thing seeing Phil with the Transylvanian Hunger shirt on. Must have been about 13. I was obsessed with Pantera and Phil at the time. Saw him rocking that shirt and was like, I got to give that a try. It looks brutal. Went and bought the CD and remember playing it on repeat with all my stoner friends at the time who couldn't get into it. Even I was a bit jarred at the repetitive drumming, but it was that one riff in the song Transylvanian Hunger that just stuck with me. It was so brutal, cold, and emotional. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. This sparked my love for Fenriz and Dark Throne, and after all these years, that remains my favorite black metal album and song ever. Love it. Side note, I had that same emotional connection when I first heard Curse of Conception, specifically Earthbound, and then remember vividly listening to that Radio Fenriz episode when it aired at the time, and he played that song and was loving it. Fucking rad, man. Best thing ever. Really was. Love what you're doing, man. Keep it up. I'm a major collector of old vintage metal shirts on Insta. If you're into that stuff, give me a follow. His tag, everyone, is morbid_mercenary. Most prized piece being the Dark Throne Soulside Journey long sleeve that Peaceville put out in 1991. Best of the best. Cheers, man. Hail Big Riff Energy. Max, dude, I thank you. I checked out your page and I looked at your tagged photos and I met you, it looks like at Desert Fest London. Why didn't you mention that? You and your friends were very, very nice and I enjoyed meeting you. You have some crazy shirts. Check out his collection, everyone. And Max, please listen to this Coffin Storm album. It's not Transylvanian Hunger, but I think it's better. Dario. What's up, Nate? This is Dario. My buddy Rick and I always enjoy seeing you at local San Antonio, Austin shows. Yeah, you guys were the first people that I saw at the Tank Crimes show, man. Always good to see you guys. Love the YouTube channel. Been subscribed since episode 9 and haven't missed one yet. Anyway, interested in your thoughts on the Sword. I've heard you mention them a couple times. I've always been a huge fan and feel they have some nasty big riff energy with that Texas vibe. I was sad to see them break up. I would love to see a collaboration between you and JD. How do you say his name? Cronies? I can hear the heavy riffs in my ears. Thanks, Nate, for being an ambassador for the genre. The music has been vital to my life for almost all my 54 years on Earth. Dario also asked how to contribute to the channel. Look in the description. I don't have Cash App or any of that other stuff. Yeah, PayPal, $10 to move your question to the front. And the PayPal info is in the description. I love the Sword, man, especially the first album. That first album came out when I was a senior in high school. Talk about youthful exuberance. I was going very, very, very hard to that album. We went and saw them in Oklahoma City, actually, when they only had that album out. So they played the whole thing. Great show. I remember there was like a lot of backlash from the old heads or the true metal guys because the dudes in the Sword looked kind of hipstery. And I remember not caring when I heard the music. That record to me, much like the Coffin Storm album, every riff on the first Sword album is an A riff. It's either A minus, A, or A plus, all of them, every single one of them, start to finish. That's just a phenomenal record. I tried to listen to it recently, and I was a little let down by the production. The production's not as good as I remember. And the second album I had a little tough time getting into because of the cymbals. They're just so loud, and it's just there's certain sounds that my brain just, I don't know if it's like I'm on some kind of spectrum or something, probably, but there's certain, like a running faucet or silverware hitting plates or something, and the cymbals on the second Sword album do that to my brain, where to the point like I can't even really enjoy it. But they have a lot of good records. The second one's really good. What's that one called, Apocryphon or something? That one is really underrated. They have one with a car on the front. I heard that on tour. That one's good. You know, I saw them years later too, opening for Down and Metallica on Metallica's Death Magnetic tour. So this was probably 2007 or 8, something like that. And the Sword was the best band by far. And we were actually talking about touring Europe with them, and it was like pretty far along in discussions when they randomly broke up. And listen, I just talk shit on this show. I don't really investigate to see if I'm right about certain stuff. You hear certain stuff in the rumor mill. I try not to say anything with any sense of authority unless I feel 99% sure that it's true. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that the dude broke the band up on social media without telling anybody. If I'm wrong on that, please someone correct me, but that's the word on the street. And it was certainly a surprise to us. So obviously that tour didn't happen. But yeah, good band, man. Good band. What were there other questions? I can't remember. I already erased everything to move to the next one. Okay. Thanks, Dario. Good to hear from you. Eric Lawrence. Yo, Nate, how's it going? Met you at the Metal Injection show in Anaheim. Huge fan of Spirit Adrift, but I didn't know about your channel until just recently. Been catching up on the back catalog. Anyway, I'm the ball guy that was praising you for talking shit about merch cuts during the set. We talked through all of Machine Head's set, if I remember right. I play in a punk band called Less Than Perfect, and the day after we met, I wrote a song about merch cuts called Suck My Merch Cut. I'm attaching a link to the song. Yeah, I listened to it, man. I like old punk. I would say, it's a good, solid punk song, and I like the lyrics. I think they're very relevant to what's going on. Give this a shot when you write your next song. Cut everything in half. So you're, I know it's crazy because the song's only 2 minutes long, but if you play, maybe not the verses, because like a verse kind of has to be 4, but if you play a chorus 4 times, do it twice. If you have a solo section with, I don't think you did on this song, but if you have a solo section with 8 cycles of a riff or whatever, do it 4. Like, cut everything literally in half and see how you like that. That's just, I don't know. That's a fun little exercise that I thought of when I was listening to that song. Okay. Also, I had one question I thought maybe you could talk about on your show. Like you, I'm very into physical fitness and combat sports. I feel like I came upon heavy music and combat totally independently from one another, but I'm starting to notice a lot of people are enthusiasts of both. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on why those two worlds cross over, why combat sports and heavy music are often embraced by the same people. I was going to ask J-Dog, but I figured his response would be predictable. Thanks for everything. Love your channel. I have officially attempted to contact the dog, and I know that he does everything about a week in advance, and he's just now posting videos like back from Hell's Heroes. So I'm going to give him a few more days until I start formally issuing a duck in the Nate Dog statement. But I don't think the J-Dog is ducking the Nate Dog just yet. But he's got a few more days until I elevate the situation to ducking the dog status. But yeah, maybe I'll ask him if he agrees to come on here. Man, the merch cut thing, yeah, it's funny how people will bitch about it and sign these little meaningless bullshit Instagram petitions and do all this and that, but they don't actually like actively refuse to participate in it or do anything to criticize it that might jeopardize their standing with people. And that's not me, man. That's not me. Like, to the point that I'm just not gonna fucking do it, period, until it changes. And if it doesn't change, then fuck them, you know. But that, you weren't even asking about merch cut. Don't get me started on the merch cut. Heavy music and fitness or combat sports, honestly, dude, I don't see a lot of crossover there. I see a lot of crossover with heavy music and like horror, and I just think that that's something in people that wants to seek out stuff that's extreme and exciting and pushing the envelope and getting the adrenaline flowing, and also sort of like a way of not participating in like boring normal society. Like, there are very active subcultures that have grown around things like horror movies and heavy metal and stuff like that. Also, those two genres within those industries, those are the people that financially support the artwork more than any other genre. So like during COVID, when theaters were shutting down and stuff like that, I have a friend who owns a company that makes movie posters, and he said horror was like the only thing keeping theaters going during a whole stretch there during COVID. And those are the people that'll still buy Blu-ray and still buy tickets and all that. Same with metal. Like, physical media, fans of heavy music are the people that have never stopped forking out their hard-earned dollars for a record or a CD or a t-shirt. So there's just a different level of dedication. As far as combat sports and heavy music, I think it's rare, actually. And it's so rare that when somebody in the combat sports sphere is a metal fan, it's like a big deal because it's rare. So like Josh Barnett, you know, he does pro wrestling and all kinds of different shit. And he was one of the very first UFC heavyweight champions. I actually got to meet him when I was on tour with Nails. Nice guy, kind of scary, understandably so. But yeah, so it's like a big deal that there's a guy in the combat sports world who's like into real metal, right? Another example would be Overkill, Angela Hill, who has been very supportive of Spirit Adrift. I wore one of her t-shirts on the cover of Decibel magazine when we got our cover, and it's kind of been a back and forth ever since. She wears our Enlighten and Eternity album cover tee in a lot of her social media videos and stuff, which we really, really appreciate. But here again, like, it's very noticeable when someone in combat sports loves heavy music because it's rare. We got to witness Clay Guida, the legend, walking out to Walk by Pantera in Austin, Texas, and that was super cool. Yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I think it needs to be more common. Who's another guy? Matt Brown. Matt Brown from Ohio. Absolute terrifying man. Sober dude. He was at the Damage Plan show actually when Dimebag got killed. He was there in person. But I know he's a big fan of heavy music. But you see my point. It's like I take note when it happens because it's not all that common. All right, here's a very lengthy email, but it checks two boxes that I am passionate about that I will always read on air. If you write me and you are from South America or anywhere in Scandinavia or Germany, places that have never wavered in their passion for big riff energy. The United States is a fickle place when it comes to the worship and the commitment to big riff energy. But there are places that are not fickle. Places like Germany, places like Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, South America, Brazil, places like that. If you write me from there, I will always read your thing on here. The second box it checks is I will always read stories about how people got into this. I love it. I love hearing it. I think everyone loves hearing it. How did you discover Big Riff Energy? So this checks both boxes. This is from Tiago. Stick with me here. It's a great story. Just watched the Solitude Eternus episode, and man, it took me back to 25 years ago trying to find their stuff. I don't have any questions at all right now. I just felt compelled to share it, as I've been meaning to send an email. Almost every band you mentioned on the podcast is a favorite of mine. Enter Arma, Rotting Christ, Chapel of Disease. Here we go. Sorry if I digress too much. I'm 45 years old now, and I started listening to metal in January 91. Almost by accident while watching Rock in Rio on TV with some friends. Seeing Sepultura, Megadeth, Queensryche was cool and all, but when Halford took the stage driving a Harley, it was life-changing. The Judas Priest concert from that night is on YouTube. The Black Album came later on that year, and I became obsessed with Metallica as I was getting my hands on their earlier albums. Then Brazil caught up with the grunge explosion in early 92, and I loved it as well, especially Alice in Chains and Soundgarden. Anyway, Solitude Eternus and doom metal. Back here in Brazil as well, the style in itself was pretty much non-existent by that time during my formative years. Only doom metal I knew was Sabbath. But even then, the label doom metal wasn't applied to them as much as one of the Holy Trinity with Zeppelin and Deep Purple. As Sepultura became mainstream in the country with Chaos AD, would become almost pop later with Roots, I wasn't drawn to bands like Pantera and groovy, heavier bands, and I went underground listening to power and prog metal, and finally getting earlier Iron Maiden albums, followed by Angra and Dream Theater, and then death metal, Death, Obituary, and other bands related to older Sepultura at the time. Doom metal? None. Well, I love the darker approach on Maiden's X Factor and Paradise Lost, Draconian Times. Also a huge fan of Dehumanizer, so I guess the seed was already planted. There we go, baby, Dehumanizer, man. As I moved back to Sao Paulo for college in 97, the previous 4 years I had spent in a small city with little access to albums, I would go see Galeria do Rock. Back then, it was a mall with tons of record stores, most of them dedicated to metal. Not so many nowadays, but the building is still there. And had access to the little thing back then called the internet. That's when doom metal came into picture for me with rumors of Candlemass kind of reforming, and I got to know their first 4 80s albums by tape trading with friends I had made an email list. I get what you say about their cheesiness. I love it. Not hard to, as I love power metal. And I've heard something about Solitude Eternus, but it was hard to find any album from them in Brazil. We're getting through it, guys. I'm gonna scroll. Sorry, I'm gonna skip a little bit of stuff, man. So this dude of Tiago finally one day I found the Downfall CD in a small store at Galeria do Rock. It was pretty cheap. It looked like a promo version. I was blown away. Felt like a grungy, meaner Candlemass, but still epic. Something as a 90s kid I could relate more. Phantoms, Only This, and Nothing More. These are the Nameless, Concern, Chapel of Burning, all of them great songs. But I heard they had a newer album. And then in early 99, he's traveling abroad, went to London. Every store I entered, I wanted to find something from Solitude Eternus. Still, the few copies of Adagio all of them had received were sold instantly. The only thing I found was a double edition of Downfall, along with Through the Darkest Hour. Obviously, I bought it. Didn't have a CD player, so I had to wait till I got back to Brazil. Once I put on the CD and heard Falling, You Said It All. What a great album. Still my favorite by them. The more sophisticated arrangements were really up my alley as he was getting more and more into prog. So our friend Tiago becomes buddies with a dude named Gonzalo and a Savatage message board. Gonzalo is from Texas. Gonzalo knows John Perez, and they sent Tiago a bunch of Solitude Eternus CDs. Yeah, here we go. Signed them all. Tiago sent me a picture. Even though I'm trying to keep this simple, I'll throw the picture up. Here's all his Solitude Eternus CDs. I met Robert Lowe when I saw him with Candlemass in Europe in the late 2000s. Loved the albums he recorded with them, especially Death Magic Doom. I'm not fond of approaching musicians on festivals, but I was with a friend who's close to the Candlemass guys, and one thing led to another. I'd have loved to go to Hell's Heroes this year, but unfortunately the timing of the festival didn't work for me. Amazing lineup, but Solitude would be the reason alone. I hope they play again and I can make it to wherever they do it. This is pretty much it. My top 4 doom metal bands: Candlemass, Solitude Eternus, Yob, and Trouble. Not a bad top 4, man. So see, there you go. I was saying last episode that the Solitude Eternus reformation at Hell's Heroes made a lot of people happy, and that I'm sure if they played more shows and even made more music, it would make a lot of more people happy all around the world, including Tiago in Brazil. Man, write me bigriffenergy@gmail.com. I love hearing these stories, man. I love that we are all banding together and keeping this exuberance and this excitement that inspires albums like this Coffin Storm album. We're keeping it alive together. And I'm working on some guests. Somebody mentioned J-Dog. I'm working on J-Dog. I don't want to sick y'all on him yet. Like I said, I'll give him a few more days to check his messages and stuff. I'm working on Fenriz. That's a long shot, I know, but I feel like we would have a great talk. And thanks to whoever told me how to get a hold of him through that. Radio Fenriz is no more, but I want to shout out his new thing. What's it called? Fenriz Metal Pact. It's basically the same thing. It's a $3 a month Patreon. Check that out. Speaking of Doom, working on the top 10 Doom list. Fucking pain in the ass, time consuming. But that'll be out next week in lieu of another episode. If you want to move your question to the top of the list, like Dario was trying to do, it's in the description. PayPal me, bigriffenergy@gmail.com, $10. Your email goes to the top of the list. And man, that's it. Yeah, no episode next week. Send me your questions regardless, and be on the lookout for the top 10 greatest doom metal albums ever. Buy this Coffin Storm album. If you are a false, do not entry. But if you are not a false, buy it. Check it out. Support this kind of stuff so that we can push the ship in the right direction. I feel like things are back on track in 2024. We went through a drought of very little riff energy, which is understandable, but I'm feeling a lot more excitement this year. Things are looking up, but so far Norway is kicking our ass. So everybody else step it up, and I'll see you next week for the top 10 Doom thing. All right, peace out.